By the time my Egypt experience was up, I could order food, I could take taxis, I could direct people how to get to my house, I could play around, joke around, but you know, that was it. I still wasn't really conversational, but I really didn't have that much language training before I got there, and it was a challenge. But it forces you to learn. You're kind of in that life or death situation. Your brain kind of like kicks in and you figure out ways to communicate, and the language just comes a lot faster than I think it would if you were just stuck at home. I could really involve myself with the language, to spend my time learning the language, but Arabic is such a complex language that if you're gonna spend time learning it, you know, you have to focus all of your energy on that.
So I went to Russia. I only had 1 year's experience 5 years ago. All I knew how to do was say some words, hello, goodbye, izinicha, excuse me, stuff like that. I didn't know colors, I didn't know anything. A lot of people thought I was crazy for going over there, not knowing this, with this crazy hard language. But I went over there and it was difficult. My language classes I had, we met like 9 hours a week, intense. It was very frustrating at times because I didn't understand. One of the hardest things I always felt insecure about was ordering. One time I said I was ordering a belini, which is like a dessert pancake, and the word in Russian for chocolate, I said, think shokoladom, and I said shokolatom or something, and they had no idea what I was saying, and you know, it's like a little difference, but they couldn't understand it, so ordering was interesting.
I stayed in contact with my family through a program called Reptail, which is phenomenal. Basically, you just put a couple of dollars on the account and you can speak to each other on an actual phone for hours and hours and hours. And actually, what it is you put the local number of the person in whatever country in the States on, and they can call you back with a local number in the United States. And I can call them with a local number in China where I was at. So it was a phenomenal program, and it allowed them to contact me and allowed me to contact them very easily.
I missed my family when I first got there because it was like, oh my gosh, I'm in this totally new place. And I have a few close friends here, but I miss my mom more than anything. So after about a month or so of being there, we decided that we would make her lifelong dream come true and she would come and visit me and we would travel throughout Europe together. So halfway through, I had the great opportunity to have my mom with me, and we traveled throughout Spain, France, and Italy. And then when we weren't together, we kept in touch using Skype. So we probably talked about once a week. I made it a point to stay up a little later since there's a 9-hour time difference, and to call home to Utah.
But I remember one time specifically, I was on the metro and there was all these guys were white, young, bald-headed individuals. And I remember they kept looking back at me, and I was like, oh God, help me now, you know, and they kept looking back. And so I was really trying to stay with my roommates. I was like, oh, and I didn't tell any of them because sometimes, you know, they don't understand. I don't know, if you're you can tell these things. And I remember I got off the train and they kept looking back and they kept whispering and they pointed back at me at one time. And I remember I kept walking slower and slower, and even up the escalator. Russia has the deepest metro system in the world, especially St. Petersburg. And they were going up the escalator and they would look back at me. And I just kind of moved in towards the crowd and kind of, I don't say bent down, but I don't know, I tried to make myself disappear. And they forgot about me and they walked out and they kept going. And that was that. But that was scary, you know, and I don't think that I was over-exaggerating the experience, but I will say sometimes I may have been paranoid. If somebody's pointing at you and they're looking at you, then you're gonna feel like, okay, you know, something's maybe threatening me.
Personally, I don't feel like I did experience that much racism, but that's not to say that it doesn't exist. Sometimes in Egypt, I think it's more of like a something more based on socioeconomic level, in terms of the people who are darker, like me, tend to live in Upper Egypt, which is the southern part of Egypt, and that's also a very poor part of Egypt. And so typically, they're doing, the people who are from that parts, and maybe they come to Cairo, they're doing kind of like menial tasks, and they're not really looked in the highest regard, with the highest respect in society. However, at the end of the day, I was still a foreigner. The way I dressed, I wasn't wearing, traditional clothes of people from, Upper Egypt. People could still see that at the end, and this is kind of from that weird perspective, my socioeconomic level was very much American. And so I really wasn't treated that poorly and with that much racism, because you could kind of see by the way I dressed and by the way I carried myself that I could blend in, but at the end of the day I was still a foreigner, and that was kind of evident.
I learned a hands-on experience of economic development, how it actually will affect the country on the micro as well as the macro level. And then I just learned there's more to just saying that, I just want to enter international sector. There's a total step that you're taking, a very large step that you're actually undertaking. And by going abroad and actually seeing and experiencing and immersing myself in the culture, I learned a great deal about it. So I would say the study abroad experience was a key part in trying to enter the international sector.
One public policy aspect that was influenced by my study abroad experience was homelessness. And coming from San Francisco, which has a really large homeless population, it was kind of a culture shock to go to Bilbao, Spain, where in all of Basque Country they have less than 300 homeless people. And the idea of homelessness, that you don't have a home to go to, is kind of a foreign concept in itself in Spain, because there is such a large social safety net there for people who lose their jobs and people who kind of run on hard times. So for me, the European model offered maybe something that could influence US politics and where we are going in the future. So that really brought a new perspective on how things can be better.